Hello, my name is Gia. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe now for more self-care, self-love, and self-image. And I have a new video out every single Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So this book, Make It Nice by Dorinda Medley, was so sweet. I cried a few times actually, because she has a huge heart. She has a wonderful story, and she is it is what it is with her. Like, she's so loving, and when you hear, I listen to the audiobook version of this because I like to hear, she narrated it herself, and I like to hear how the author wants to tell her story and how it's supposed to be said or heard, as opposed to another like voice actor's interpretation of how it's supposed to be, of how they think it sounds. Where this is like the original idea, so you're getting the fullest form of their content. Just as a little intro, I love watching the Housewives because I run like 7 businesses and I'm exhausted. My brain is going at full capacity more than anything else all the time. And I'm always listening to books. I'm always like listening to nonfiction specifically about like neurology and different insane studies, and I love watching the Housewives and turning my brain off because they're just something that I can play in the background and like laugh, because you do fall in love with the characters, and one of the characters I fell in love with was Dorinda Medley, and it's very lighthearted, and like her character, she says how there will be 15 hours of shooting, but they'll only show a couple minutes of what actually happened, and you'll see comment on the show that is very small, and other people, all of a sudden, you see it a few days later when it's all arranged and edited, and they find that comment being repeated over and over again by multiple different characters in the show. So I think that's really interesting how things can kind of get skewed, obviously. But she says the show's not scripted, where I know like in old reality shows growing up, it was scripted, because it was weird. Like they kind of uncovered what was scripted in another book from another reality star, what was scripted and what was not, like what was totally conflated. And it's not scripted, like they'll give you like an idea of what the problem is, and then you guys kind of act it out and fake it out. Like Laguna Beach was really fake, where this apparently is as real as it gets. Dorinda Medley is from the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and she came from a humble family of a Polish and Italian parents. Her original name was Dorinda Sekala. She had brothers and sisters. She handled fame very well. So in my opinion, obviously, but what she does is, so like when people take the time to talk to her or like tell her something, think of a note that is kind, a comment on social media. Like she had to learn social media real quick after the show. She says how she takes the time back to talk with fans too, because they took the time to do it, and she's that kind of person with that kind of energy and level of respect, which I love about her. And so a lot of people on the street will approach her and say rude things that are insulting, which I don't get. And then because other people don't get the full picture, they just get what the show is showing you. And then other people are very polite and will tell her things and shower her with compliments. And some people will say, hey, I know you from Housewives, it's Dorinda from Housewives. And she's like, yeah. And so and finally people also say, make it nice, like her quote, and she has like a few quotes that she goes over in the book too, but make it nice is like her big one. That's the title of this book. She says, I made it nice. And so she says, when people say that to her, she says back, I did I did make it nice. So I appreciate that when I see a celebrity. I live here in Los Angeles, so I'm not like saying this to brag, it's just a matter of a fact. I constantly see celebrities all the time, and don't ask them for a picture, just let them live their lives and mind their own business. I'm sure like they say that in the beginning it's like a thrill, but like it gets old, so they just let them live their lives. Like don't try to sneak a picture with these people. Like yes, if they're at a performance and they're meant to make an appearance and get paid for it, but if they're just living their lives, leave them alone. So she has a really interesting view of money, because she's seen both extremes, where she goes into stories of how she loves working. First off, she has an incredible work ethic. She worked at Liz Claiborne, but she also, before that, she waitressed at this beautiful hotel restaurant, you know, like those banquet halls, like those, that it was like really elegant and upscale. It's like a castle in Massachusetts, and she's like really proud of her work ethic, and she's good at talking her way through things and presenting herself well. She takes a lot of pride in doing things 110%, which I am like. So I think it's really important to dress up well, speak kindly, put your best foot forward all the time, and that's how she is when it comes to everything mostly, and then her work ethic. But on the show, they just show you the parts where they're screaming because it's drama and it gives you a reaction. So on the show, they're like a little much, but she's also very passionate, and that's how she actually talks in the show and in the book. So she's very real. And so she really loved work. She loved having something for herself, like a purpose and a work ethic. And she went from waitressing, saved all her money, moved to New York, and worked at Liz Claiborne. So she was one day like going out for drinks with like I think it was like coworkers and friends, and she got a huge bonus and said, "This round's on me," and for the whole bar, there was like a huge party, and she went completely broke and had to move back in with her parents back to the Berkshires, and her mom didn't give her trouble. She was just like, yeah, of course, come home. And she rebuilt herself back up for a couple of years, waitressing back at that place, that castle, that like hotel resort thing, and she said this is the perfect time to hide out and lay low, lick her wounds, and she got braces, and because she wanted to fix her teeth. And then she went back to New York, saved enough, and she ended up going to this party in New York with like this huge shrimp bowl. That's like the story, the reference, and where because she's always connecting with people, and she's always getting invited to things, and so she like puts herself out there, and so she ended up like standing at the bar, on the bar, and dancing, and she met her husband Ralph that night. So Ralph Lynch, is a Scottish venture capitalist, I think it was, like some type of high finance, and so she married Scott. They felt in love, and they were so very in love, and they're still friends today. As you know, in the show, she's obviously dating someone else and dates multiple other people, but this guy Ralph, I have to say, he is a true gentleman, and he eventually like has to move to Hong Kong for work, and so she goes with him. She lives a new life, and she's like, I've been to like New York, and that's it, from Massachusetts, from the Berkshires, and then I go to Hong Kong all of a sudden and just uproot my life. And her mom was in tears. Her mom was like, how could you do this? But she's like, don't worry, because at the time they didn't have FaceTime. They didn't, like, calling people was like with an operator even at that time, where long distance was just like not a thing, and it's really disconnecting. So she went to Hong Kong, lived there for a couple years, and like found like the group of the wives of the venture capitalists, of the bankers, and she kind of felt alone, because like when you're traveling and your husband's like at work all day, obviously you'll feel alone. Or just when you're in another country where you don't speak the language, it's really alienating, obviously, and she just felt really separated. But then they ended up having to move to London, where she ended up living like a lot of her best life there, with Ralph. She made a ton of good friends that were really wild and interesting, and she made a ton of friends who were in high society. But then there was like one friend she had that she made that is friends with her till this day, and helps with her daughter. It's like her daughter is the one who first gave her a bath when she had her daughter Hannah later. But she met this woman and became instant friends with her, because she wasn't like the other high society ladies. She was like a little rock and roll. She was a little like thought differently, and a little more similar to her, where this was post Thatcher, so it was like super formal in England. And the thing is, I am married to an Englishman, so for those of you who don't know, England is really crazy formal. So here in the United States, we wear our underwear on the outside, we wear t-shirts on the outside. So we wear jeans. Like jeans, it drives me nuts sometimes when I see people with the shoes they wear. It's like the shoes finish the outfit, and you're not wearing dress shoes, and you're like wearing a suit and some Birkenstocks. I don't get it. So I live in Los Angeles too, where it's like the height of casuality, and New York is the opposite. It's a bit more like London. It's like a newer version of London, but London is very, very formal, where if someone sends you, like she says it in the book too, how someone sends you an invitation, you have to send them a beautiful note back with your stationery. And I have multiple sets of my own stationery with my monogram, with my name on it, and all this. And it's just very old school. And she went to get her certificate in etiquette and kind of like a finishing school, and so she could teach people how to host and comportment and all that in London, so that she could kind of keep up and know all the rules. And obviously, if you've seen the show, Dorinda is actually very, very polished. And there's a few women in the show who are very polished, and then there are a few who are sloppy, or they're just like inelegant because they're like, oh, I'm this, I'm that. Yes, like when they're like putting their image out there too hard, where Dorinda just bees about it. She just is about it. So she learned all of this in London, and she was a housewife to Ralph, and she was really in charge of the finances. And she talks about how going to the bank in London was a total affair. So like it would take you 2 hours to wait for the banker, then 2 hours, like a few minutes to sit and talk with him. So like you'd have to get ready. It was like a whole thing just to deposit from the bank, and it was like a really nice bank. It wasn't like just like go to an ATM, or things are different now, obviously. So but she talks about like her life in London and how glamorous it was, and she was rubbing shoulders with all these people. Like Princess Diana was one of her customers when she opened a cashmere clothing line, and she really, like, her husband is Scottish, so they have like some of the most fabulous cashmere and twill and all that. And so she talks about how she opened her business of cashmere, where it's like simple basics, but you can customize them as much as possible, and that's what she loved. And she just had like these parties where girls would come over, her friends would come over, and they would spread the word, be like, oh my gosh, I love that sweater, where'd you get it? And she's like, oh, Dorinda Medley, she's having another event here, come buy her sweaters. And she had like a whole business based on this, and it gave her a lot of purpose. It shaped her life, and as a society woman, not just going to like events and galas and all these fancy parties, but she like really loved being there for her husband. Like I don't know, if her husband is such a gentleman, that's like the only way I can describe him. He's very down to earth, very grounded, and he's very British. I can say from experience, being married to a Britishman. He's Scottish specifically, let's say. So my husband's from the very north of England, so it's like on the border of Scotland. So she talks about how Hannah, her daughter, brought them closer. Also, she also talks about how her giving birth to her daughter Hannah brought them even closer as a family, as a couple, and how they loved her. Like they put their love for her over anything else. But their lives started changing as she was focusing more on her life as a mother and as the events with her cashmere business, and her husband was just at work all day, and so her friends became a closer relationship than she did with her husband. But having her daughter, she really, like, this was her duty. Her daughter was her life, is her life. And then so she and Ralph ended up splitting up, and so she would talk to her friends and say, hey, this event, I would love to go. And they said, sorry, darling, it's only for couples. It's only for evens, not odds. And I think that's like a very English thing to say. Like they won't, like English people will like ninja insult you. They're very subtle. So she like was kind of cast out because she wasn't with Ralph anymore. So she moved back to New York, and she wasn't working, but like she had plenty of money because I'm just assuming because of Ralph and like her savings and her cashmere business. But I'm guessing she was taken care of because she moved back to New York, and she didn't focus on dating. She just focused on her daughter. But eventually, when she did come around dating, there were a couple guys that were very distant and cold, and they like would have their own kids too, but it just didn't work out. But until she met Richard, I forgot his last name, Richard. Richard Medley. Oh my goodness, Richard Medley. So he was like the opposite of her husband, but she saw the way he also had children of his own, 2 daughters, and she said how when he saw the way he was with Hannah, it was like they were old friends, like they knew each other from a different time, and he had so much patience for her when she would ask really silly questions where she didn't have the patience for, and she was like, wow, you like really filled this hole in my life. And so they ended up getting married, and he was so like, they had a huge ceremony, and their wedding was very oh yeah, back to the, oh my goodness, I skipped a huge part. So her first husband, the Scottish guy, at her wedding she ended up going back to the Berkshires at that place that she used to work, and she couldn't afford it and didn't want to put her parents through that financial stress, so she asked a huge favor because she used to work there, and they're like, you're such a wonderful worker, and so they let her. She said her family will pay for the reception, but can they have like the actual officiated wedding there at that castle resort place? And they said, of course you can. And so like all of his family came in kilts, and all of her family came in beautiful dresses. And so anyway, so this next wedding, it was a little smaller, but like he was very out of place, and he kind of lived like not fast and loose, but he was like larger than life. It's what he sounded like. Richard, the second husband, he was very like real. He didn't mess around with her, and they loved each other for sure. And she told him when they first started dating that she would always put her daughter first, and he understood that, and he loved that about her. And that's also one of the very big reasons they got married, because he understood, because he had daughters of his own, and he knows what it means. And I think he was very patient with her because he also had daughters of his own. And so they had like aerial dancers and performers at their reception, and then he was really sick, so he was in the hospital, and he was in the hospital. I just hate talking about death. I don't like it. But long story short, he was in the hospital. When she said when he passed away, she could feel like him saying, I gotta go, and then he just left and died. And it was really sad. Like, I cried. So she made her daughter a priority, and she realized, like, I don't have to marry ever again. I just want to, like, focus on my daughter. She's, like, really proud of her beautiful, amazing daughter who, like, lectured Richard, the late husband, on lemurs, and which, like, gave a TED talk on lemurs is what she said. I thought that was really cute. And then she was never interested in, she's, like, worried about her money. She was thinking, okay, so how am I going to work? Like, she was just, like, trying to, not worried about her money, but worrying about her purpose, I should say, because she was wondering, what should I do with my life now? And then she was just living her life, and she had plenty of money to kind of just like live off of and coast. And she's like, money is always her fear, to lose it all and just never. I think we all have that fear. Most of us have, most of the world has that fear. It's like, are we gonna be able to eat next week? So she kind of had this, and that, like, she never wants to run out of money. And even though her daughter was like going to college and all this, and they were fine, she was always thinking, like, you know what, I've done it before, I can do it again, I can always work. And she loves working. She has a really good work ethic, and she was invited to join the Housewives a few times, and she was never interested. And then someone finally persuaded her, and she goes about how, like, why it's called Make It Nice. So the book, so if you've seen the show, she like goes through strenuous efforts to throw this beautiful dinner party. People aren't necessarily being very civil at her party, or even just being polite, and they're being kind of taken for granted. She felt taken for granted because she went through all this effort of setting up the table was beautifully set up, with her finishing school style, and the food she made, like, she didn't have a caterer, like, she did it herself, because she's very like that. Like, she's more family oriented. Like, it doesn't feel like a cold party where it's like, oh, 5 people are serving you and you have to be formal. It's like, no, you're in her home in the Berkshires at Bluestone Manor, and she's gonna make you feel at home and comfortable. So, like, you get that family vibe with her. Like, she's very motherly, and the people were just being rude left and right to her. She's like, I made it nice. So that's why she said it. And which she did make it nice. And so just a little bit more about her, something that I glossed over, or I didn't gloss over yet. I completely forgot. So she went to college. She grew up in a family that was modest, and she had quite a few siblings. I don't remember the exact number, but she had brothers and sisters. Like, that's how many. In today's day and age, we just have like a couple siblings, or if not just one. And her parents were immigrants, and so she has like that immigrant work ethic. And they put her through school. Like, they did everything they could to put her through this nice preppy school. And going into college, she joined a sorority that was kind of like the preppy college, but she didn't fully fit into that scene. Like, she learned everything she could from that prep school, so she put like her mix into things, like her style into it. And she was like still a little bit of rock and roll, she was still a little bit loose and cool, but yeah, so she, like how she is today. So when she was married to Ralph, her first husband, the Scottishman, when she was living in London, that's when she started seeing all these elegant, glamorous women in high society, where she started putting her image into that direction, and started buying her first Chanel jacket and like really dressing up and being more glam, as opposed to being like the casual Americans that we are. And like, she's always like putting like her lipstick on and looking good, but she like learned like a little bit of luxury through marrying Ralph and being surrounded by that. I think she has like a couple beautiful quotes. She says, like, take care of yourself, nobody else is gonna do it for you. And a friend's mom told her this. She said, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. And she talks about the death of her husband, Richard, whom she really loved. She says, if a song didn't have an ending, it would just be noise. Endings give a moment a meaning. And the Dr. Seuss quote, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. So yeah, I think the book was really, really good. Especially hearing an audiobook in her voice and in her tone, how it's supposed to be read and heard. And I just like the Housewives characters. I think Dorinda Medley is such a fabulous character. Like, she's one of the Housewives of New York that I probably, if I met her like at a dinner or something, I think she would be an absolute pleasant person, a good time. Where everybody else, I feel like, is really on the show, they're like heightenedly, they're like extensively too much. Like, they could be hyper dramatic, but she was very like real. She's very down to earth is how I feel. So you can get this book linked below. Yeah, so subscribe now for more weekly reads. Let me know what you think in the comments, what you think of the Housewife characters. Who's your favorite? What you think of Dorinda Medley, and if you've read her book or not, and what you think about anything in this video or anything in the book that I haven't mentioned. Please like, comment, and share this. Let me know if there's any other books that I should read and review before you buy, or whatever you want. If you just want someone to tell you about the book, for sure, like, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.